Welcome to the Prospective Doctor Podcast, brought to you by Med School Coach. Pre-med and medical students alike are encouraged to tune in each week for tips on how to become a strong med school candidate, gain acceptance into the school of your dreams, and succeed on your journey toward residency and becoming a doctor.
Hello, everyone. I am very excited for today's conversation. We have Dr. Alexandra Stockwell here to chat with us. So I'm just going to give her a moment to introduce herself and tell us about her journey to medicine.
Thank you so much. My journey to medicine is a story I don't tell very often, but I really enjoy it. So I appreciate the opportunity. So when I want to say in high school, I just really wanted to learn about everything. The whole idea of what in business we call niching down or even picking a major just seemed so uncomfortable for me because I found everything really interesting. So what did I do with that? I went to a college where I studied philosophy and mathematics, and in that I really had, and I did a lot of physics also. So I never really narrowed down. And before going to medical school, I kind of thought, did I want to have lots of different careers? I imagined a furniture import business based in Bali and then working on Wall Street and then maybe some kind of back to the land activity in a rural area. But in the end, I went to medical school thinking that that would be restrictive. And then once I got there, I thought, no, it just opens up so many possibilities. There are so many things one can do as a physician. And I had planned to go work in South Africa and join Medicine Without Borders. Like I had big ungrounded dreams that did not match the narrow science, better proceed to the next step. I've always taken a more roundabout route. But anyway, I ended up in medical school, and the very first week during orientation, I met the man who has since become my husband. And so my experience in medical school was like there were two simultaneous evolutions, two learnings happening. One was the obviously rigorous training to become a physician, and the other, which often took a back burner place because there was no putting my medical training on the back burner. But anyway, it still happened simultaneously, was the development of romance and getting married. And I actually had my first child just after my third year of medical school and my second just before my internship. I've now been married for 25 years and have 4 children, but I waited quite a while before having the third and fourth. So I want to just right off the bat share that when I started medical school in 1993, and obviously is a very different time now in medicine, in the world, in gender dynamics, and all kinds of things. But at the time, we had a lot of women in my class. It wasn't quite 50-50, but there was no one who became a parent during the entire time I was in medical school except one man. His wife had a baby. He might have taken a few hours off and wouldn't have even considered doing anything else. They had a very traditional conservative marriage, were very religious, and it was just understood that he would be focused on his work and there to say hi when he got home. Mm-hmm. So when I got pregnant, just before my OB rotation began, which was kind of fun to realize that, I really thought I might have to give up medicine. I thought I might get kicked out. Medical school is not the kind of thing where you willy-nilly take a gap year the way you can in college. And so I waited until I couldn't postpone any longer. And I was really so nervous as I went to my dean, Dean Gardner, a kind man, but I had no idea how he'd respond. I really thought it would be the end of my medical career because I was pregnant. Or it might be, let me say that, it might be. And when I told him my situation and that I wanted to take a year off between third and fourth years of medical school, he just immediately said yes and went on to kind of drop all of his older professional authority energy, of which he had plenty and needed to, and started talking to me adult to adult, essentially physician to physician, even though I wasn't a physician yet, of course, and described that he had been married and really put all of his energy and attention into his work. And his wife felt neglected and they got divorced. And he remarried and went on to have 2 children. But he never made that mistake again and always made sure to be, obviously, a very precise, good-hearted, excellent clinician and administrator, while also being a good, attentive husband that never was put on the back burner again. And so he was clear, yes, take that time off, be with your baby, you'll be away enough in the future. And he gave me his blessing. And I have to say that that experience was so impactful because it taught me that I could be a good doctor and live the way I wanted to. And so, is that included in my bio? Typically, no. But is that right for this podcast? Yes.
I absolutely love that, because a lot of times when physicians come on here, we speak a lot about their roles as physicians, like what do you do on a day-to-day basis? But what a lot of people don't mention is that being a physician is just a small component of who you are. It's not everything. So you are a wife, you are a mother, you are a physician, you're a business person, and all of those types of things. But it's great that you learned early on in medical school and you had that support that you were kind of not anticipating having, where your dean was like, okay, I'm going to speak to you as an adult because that's what you are. That's another thing that happens in education, because we're going on from college, we're going into medical school, and some people come from different careers, but adult learners are different, but they are still adults. So I'm glad that you brought that up and showed that it's okay to have a life. It's okay to have these changes during medical school, because a lot of times some people decide to put them off and they'll think, okay, maybe after school, after residency, after my first year of being an attending. And sometimes it may be too late or there may be different circumstances. So it's okay to live your full life while you're in school.
Yes. And actually, with my second child, I have a similar story, except that this time and ever after, I did it with confidence and conviction. And my husband and I decided that we didn't want to both be interns at the same time with a baby, because with both of us working 100 hours, and actually, while we were both residents together, I'll just jump ahead and say this, we were used to all of the resident couples wanting to have call together so that they could be off together. So this was before the laws were changed where we worked overnight, and so we'd have 36-hour shifts, either every third night, every fourth night, depending on the rotation, and where other couples would try to coordinate so they could be off and have the weekend together or whatever. My husband and I did a lot of work to be on alternate nights so that one of us was always home with our, at that point, children. So we knew that residency was going to be extra exponentially quantumly intense, and decided not to do it simultaneously, even though we graduated from medical school at the same time. So my husband matched in family medicine. We went to UMass Worcester and we all moved there. And I planned to become a resident when he graduated and just keep up with things enough that I could do that. However, what ended up happening was that the residency program director knew I was there, knew I was also a medical school graduate and a physician. He had someone approach him who wanted to do a combined psychiatry and family medicine residency. But what that meant is that the person would be there half the time, and half the time they'd be missing staff, basically, because she'd be in her psychiatry rotation. So I was in the area for maybe, it was 6 months. And he called me and said, hey, do you want a spot? Wow. And the reason this was so significant is that because we had intended to stagger our residencies, I actually graduated from medical school about 4 or 5 months pregnant with my second child. whom I then had in November. And the following January, this dean called me and said, hey, do you want to be an intern and split the position? And so I said yes, but instead of doing a month on, a month off, so that the other doctor was half psychiatry, half, 1 month in psychiatry, 1 month in family medicine, instead, I said I want her to do 6 months of family medicine for her intern year and then go do 6 months of psychiatry. So I started my internship when my second child was 12 months old in January. So I know that's a lot of details, but for anyone who knows the academic schedule and everything starts in July, I'm hoping this makes a lot more sense. Because basically, I started my internship 18 months after graduating from medical school, and I didn't have to go through the match because I was in the area, because the residency program director knew of me, and it was a very uncomplicated thing to create this beautiful opportunity. Now, can someone graduate and plan on this? No, that's totally not my point. But can we be good doctors, be well-trained doctors, be highly competent, pass our boards, meet all of our requirements, and take a somewhat untraveled path, be a maverick, be a pioneer, get to the same destination, taking a very scenic route? Yes, because that's what I did. So it is possible.
I find that story absolutely amazing because you didn't plan it, but it happened. And I think that's the fun about the journey of life. Like, you don't know which turn you're going to take. And sometimes great opportunities kind of fall amongst you. So for the listeners out there, I wouldn't be discouraged if things aren't going your way, because everyone has their own plans. And sometimes life has other plans for you. So,
yeah. And the main thing is, you have to work hard so that when the opportunity, like when he called, I had great letters of recommendation, my transcript, I had everything ready to go. I wasn't scrambling at that point because when I graduated, I made sure I had that with me. So it's like, be prepared and then you can be spontaneous. And the thing that I also really want to convey is that all of this could happen because my relationship with my husband was wonderful and collaborative. And it wasn't that we were ever in discussions where it was, well, what do you need? Okay, we'll make that happen. Or what do I need? It was like, what do we need? And so even the decision for him to match and for us to have a second child so that I was pregnant when I graduated from medical school, that was what we chose for our family. And our whole relationship really developed because we sat next to each other in class, and this was before smartphones, and we had paper that we were taking notes on, and we always had a running piece of paper for passing notes back and forth. And sometimes it was like, wait, which molecule did he say if we were learning the Krebs cycle? Or it would be like, last night was so fun, let's do that again soon. Or, hey, do you want to meet my parents? Like, we had just all kinds of notes interspersed with our studying. And I think sometimes people think it's not really possible to have a great relationship and be a successful medical student. And so I want to share how, yes, you can have both. And I think the really important first thing is to get clear on who you are and what your priorities are. So if you're the kind of person who, when you're in a relationship, you become a people pleaser and you contort and accommodate and you just make sure you always look good and are a great girlfriend, that's never going to work in medical school, because you have got to study the way you need to study in order to do well. In fact, my husband graduated from Harvard and had taken the science classes with the non-pre-med majors. So a lot of the biochem that we did was so easy for him. And so the amount of time he needed to spend studying was a lot less than for me, who came from a philosophy background. And yes, I had done the pre-med prerequisites, of course, but I had to work really hard in biochemistry. And so I probably studied 4 or 5 hours for every hour that he studied. If I was the kind of girlfriend who just was like, oh, yes, I'll be available whenever you want to spend time with me, that would have been the end of my success in medical school. On the other hand, if I was like, I am all about becoming a doctor, without any kind of attention available, there's no way that we would have gone on to get engaged. And so there's this whole thing, especially for women, about, can you have it all? And especially, can you have it all at once?
Mm-hmm.
Career, the family, the spa days, all of it. And I think that's a beautiful thing to start cultivating in medical school, where you prioritize your responsibilities without obsessing about them. And the main thing is that when you bring attention to a relationship, you really bring attention to your relationship. You don't treat it as medical school recovery time. You treat it as a relationship. And I think one of the most important things that we did was our conversations were not restricted to medical school. I wanted him to know me as a philosophy major. And I wanted to know him as the martial arts black belt he was. And like all kinds of things that none of our classmates knew about us. It was so important that we got to know the whole self, because while it would have felt appealing then to marry a medical student, I wasn't going to live my life with a medical student. I was going to live my life with a human being, and I wanted him to respond to me as a whole human being.
At Med School Coach, we know that getting into medical school is hard. In fact, 60% of pre-meds who apply to a medical school don't even get accepted. And if you want to get accepted into a top medical school, it's even harder. That's why more students than ever are turning to MCAT tutoring by Med School Coach. Our tutors are all 99th percentile scorers, have been through rigorous training, and can help raise your MCAT score by 12 points or more. You need every competitive advantage you can get to get into med school, so why not get one-on-one tutoring from Med School Coach? Our expert team will create a custom program just for you and help you master MCAT content where you need the help most. You'll raise your MCAT score. We guarantee it. Visit us online at medschoolcoach.com and use offer code PODCAST10 to save 10% up to $400 on a Med School Coach MCAT tutoring package. You can achieve your medical school dreams, and Med School Coach can help.
I think that's so important as you go into medical school. I love the point that you brought up about figuring out your learning styles and what you need. And although this can go with relationships, romantic relationships, as well as friendship relationships. I remember when I was in medical school, I studied with different groups, because while we may have great times on the weekends when we were off and things, we didn't have the same study styles. And trying to figure that out is really important as you guys get into your classes and your coursework, and you kind of figure out your rhythm. And also having the time when you are with your partner to separate that. Because like I said earlier, like being a physician or a medical student or something is just one component of your life. That can't be what all your conversations are about. You have to learn everybody and learn one another and about like what makes you tick, who are you as a person, and those types of things.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I guess I want to do a shout out for the people who are in medical school and have a relationship with someone who's not in medical school, because the same principle applies, just needs to be attended to in reverse, where if you're with someone who's not a physician, you don't need to tell them all about the different kinds of T cells or what was most like shocking to you in gross anatomy, but you do need to let them feel your devotion and development as a doctor, and let them in to that part of your life in whatever way is suitable based on the other person's interests and personality and the kind of relationship you want to have, because you do not do yourselves any favor to wall off who you are as a growing physician if you're with someone who's not in medicine, in the same way that you don't do yourselves any favor if you wall off the rest of your personality if you are with someone in medicine.
I love that. So as we mentioned, you are a family physician, and we all know that family medicine is based on building relationships with families. Now you're a full-time intimacy coach that specializes in relationship intimacy. I think that our listeners can kind of get an idea about my next question, but how did you find yourself working in this realm?
Okay, great question. So, yes, I met my then to become husband the first week of medical school. We went through medical school, we went through residency, we had 2 children. And what that really means is that even though, yes, I was sharing who I am throughout the evolution of our relationship, we also did not have time. We didn't have weekend getaways. We might have, but because we had young children so soon, we didn't. And we didn't have hours together exploring one another's bodies. There was a kind of efficiency in our relationship. And we both just assumed that once we had more time together, it would be a really hot and steamy marriage because we would at last have time for that. And so maybe 10 years in, we were both attendings. We didn't have any children in diapers, and we had time together to use in new ways. And we discovered that actually we had so many habits, kind of being efficient and getting to the point. And so I chose to do a training in sensuality and sexuality as much for myself personally and my marriage. And I thought it would be good to know that information because as a family doctor, you get questions about it. But really, I did it for myself. However, this training, which was rigorous and delightful, was also a coach training. And at the time, I didn't know what a coach was. I don't even think I would have been the least bit interested to find out because I took the MD after my name so seriously. If I was going to do or like work with or be any kind of professional, I wanted it to be a very well-established, well-esteemed kind of profession. And that is not how coaches are. However, because I'm a learner, I thought, well, let me go to the teaching lab.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got there, I was like, oh, this is everything that I wanted to do. It's most of what I wanted to do in medicine and none of the things that I don't want anymore. And so I transitioned. And I'll also say that sometimes when people leave medicine, it's like a complete pivot. And even though in terms of the externals, it looks like a big pivot, in terms of the essence that draws me, it's really not that different because the quality of our relationships is one of the biggest factors that determines the quality of our health, which we actually have some control over. Right? When it comes to longevity, when it comes to quality of life, it's our relationships that make the biggest difference. So I feel like what in my heart drew me into medicine is the same thing that draws me into the relationship and intimacy coaching I do now, even though it's definitely not practicing medicine.
That's awesome. So how do you, and this may be a silly question, but like, how do you find it different since you said you find some of the same things that you wanted to get out of family medicine with this? So what are you getting out of it?
I think one of the biggest differences is that it is our responsibility, and our culture and society understand this, that as a doctor, we take care of all patients, regardless of their circumstances internally and their circumstances externally. I'm not even talking about the medical elements, but just how motivated they are. Like anyone who's a doctor knows of like 400-pound people who just eat tremendously unhealthy food, or people with lung cancer who keep smoking, or people who don't have lung cancer who keep smoking. Like we all know people who basically are doing things to their own detriment. And as a coach, while there are plenty of people who would like to do things and do things differently, by and large, anyone who becomes a client of mine is highly motivated. They're investing money. It's not covered by insurance. And it's not about the money as much as about what that means. There's no entitlement in being a client. And there can be entitlement in being a patient. And I'm saying that in a judgmental way, and I actually don't mean it that way. I think it's like the natural consequence of our medical system and our society and our educational systems. It's a very complex topic. This is not a statement of blame, it's a neutral description. And when people are personally motivated, we get to go much further. I get to use many more of my skills. I get to be a far greater service. Mm. And that is energizing.
I love that.
At Med School Coach, we know that matching into the specialty of your choice and the residency program of your dreams has a dramatic impact on your career as a physician. And your USMLE score is the most important acceptance factor of all. That's why more students than ever are turning to Med School Coach for USMLE tutoring. Our tutors are all 260 plus scorers and have been through rigorous training. Plus, the average student who uses Med School Coach tutoring raises their score by 23 to 55 points. There is an enormous amount of material you need to know for Step 1 and Step 2, and Med School Coach can help you be smart about how to study. We'll create a custom program just for you. Then, we'll help you master USMLE concepts where you need help most. You'll raise your USMLE score. We guarantee it. Visit us online at medschoolcoach.com and use offer code PODCAST10 to save 10% up to $400 on a Med School Coach USMLE tutoring package. You can achieve your medical school dreams, and Med School Coach can help.
So as we mentioned about being a whole person and trying to treat a whole person and looking for other things, it's important to have passions outside of medicine. What's something that you are passionate about?
Ooh, that's a good question, because I really do feel passionate about facilitating transformation. And so I feel like my work is my hobby at this point. And I also am just completely enamored with my children, who are now ages 9 to 25, and they're no less fascinating to me than they were when they were babies. But also, I really love to draw. I think one of the things that is the most soothing to me is to just sit somewhere in nature and draw what I see, the flowers, the trees, or whatever. It helps me focus my attention, and I end up seeing things I wouldn't have seen. I don't really do anything with it. It's more for the activity than what I actually produce.
That's awesome. I wish I was an artist. When I draw, it looks like a 3-year-old drew it, but I still try.
Well, 3-year-olds really enjoy the experience.
Yes. You've given our listeners so many things to think about and so many pearls of wisdom. My final question to you is, what is the best piece of advice that you have received?
I think the best piece of advice that I received, I actually received from one of the doctors in the family medicine department where I went to medical school at SUNY Stony Brook. And he taught me the difference between urgent and important. He didn't make this up. This is something that's known in personal growth circles, but I learned it from him. And if we don't pay attention to the difference between urgent and important, our life is filled with urgent things, and we end up neglecting some important things. But if we can really prioritize the things which are important, there are many fewer urgent things. So we can see how this applies when it comes to health. If we make it important to get exercise and eat well, then we don't end up in an urgent situation because we didn't do that. And most of all, that is true in relationships. If you wait to really give attention to your relationship when it's urgent, the quality of that experience is just not anywhere near as fun as if you make it important. And let me add, same thing with medical studies. Like if you study regularly throughout the semester, then you're not left in an urgent situation where you need to cram. Mm-hmm. So this is advice that applies in all circumstances.
That's amazing. It was so wonderful to have you as a guest here today on the show. I just want to give you an opportunity to tell the listeners goodbye, as well as how they can reach out to you if they have any questions or if they want to partake in any of the intimacy coaching.
Thank you so much. I really enjoy this podcast and this conversation. So if you're interested in hearing more, please go to my website, alexandrastockwell.com, ALEXANDRA STOCKWELL.com, and you can find all of the things. I have some free things you can download. I have a book. I have various programs, some very inexpensive, some rather expensive, and it's all on my website, alexandrastockwell.com. Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure. To all of the listeners out there, click that subscribe button if you have not, and I'll see you again next week. Bye.
Each episode of the Prospective Doctor podcast is brought to you by Med School Coach. To access articles, videos, webinars, and free tools to help you succeed on your journey toward medical school and beyond, visit our website, prospectivedoctor.com. We hope you tune in again next time.